going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, the Leo King, on highvibe.tv for After Dark Deep Astrology After Show for June the 11th through the 17th of 2019. If you missed Deep Astrology and you missed the live show, don't worry. You can always catch it at highvibe.tv. Just go there. It's on the front page, or click the catalog. You can buy it individually for just $1.99, or you can subscribe for literally, we have plans that are as much as a big cup of coffee for the whole entire month. And you get all my daily horoscopes, and you get all the weekly horoscopes, and you get 8 other people, and we're doing almost 100 videos a week on there. Make sure you check it out, highvibe.tv. That's where you get Deep Astrology. And if you want to watch it live, of course, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Leo King YouTube. But tonight, we got a lot of people in the house. Why don't we do a pie and shot and see who we got in the house? We got Sarah Posh. We got Rachel Stewart in the house. We got Abby Moneyhunt, who's co-founder and also owner of highvibe.tv. And we got Dylan, the spirit advisor, again in the house. How's everyone doing tonight?
Awesome.
Into the mic, por favor.
Oh. I'm doing awesome.
Thank you. Well, you know, I want to ask you all, I'm going to take my glasses off for this one. We're having a little fun there, everyone. So I talked tonight a lot about the full moon coming up, and there's some pretty intense aspects of Mars and Saturn which we associate with delays, but also confronting how to really, I think, grow up and identify. And there's a lot of emotional elements that are here, and we're getting ready for eclipse season. I don't know. Where do you guys just all feel in your own journey and where you're all going with all this intense energy? Why don't we just kind of go down the road? We'll start with Sarah and head on down.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm feeling it as like it's time to keep putting the hard effort in, like the hard work every day. And every time I'm feeling like, is it even worth it? Like, is this even making any kind of difference? What's the point? Spirit gives me this like glimpse of like, yes, like this is right action. This is right effort. Keep going. And I feel like right now is the time where you just don't give up. Like you just like can't leave the match right now. This is like the time to show up. So I think it's an exciting time. But
what about stuff that is in the confrontation that we do have to kind of give up? What?
Oh.
Because it's like kind of an interesting point you bring up. I believe that there's a lot of stuff not to give up on right now, but I also believe, from what I view, that there are stuff that we do, because I think that this combination is like too much and the ship will sink.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Well, one thing that I think I've had to personally give up on, and I've been watching this like process, is giving up on the old story of being butthurt. You know, like taking things personally. You talked about the victim thing. I think we have to give that up. I think that's a big one. And then, yeah, there's things we have to give up, like wanting to be everything for everybody, wanting to define success or productivity based off of an old paradigm that like doesn't work. So we're exhausted, or we're, like you talked about, not feeling actually emotionally engaged in your life. And like that being a sign that you're not doing something you should actually be doing. And I think right now, if we're pushing ourselves, even if we're not emotionally aligned, I think we're getting burnout or we're getting sick. And so I haven't personally had that experience, but yeah, I can see that as well, the giving up. And it's also giving up control, like giving up like things to be happening a certain way. That's also coming up, that it's like Mars Saturn opposition to me also says, if there's some sort of delay, like it could be fortuitous, you know, there could be a deeper meaning behind that. So let go of what's not working and do what you can where you can. Yeah.
I love that. What are you feeling about all this, Rachel?
Well, I think it's a great question to start out with, because definitely any of the viewers that haven't not yet seen the Deep Astrology for this week, if you didn't see the live, you're going to want to watch the replay, because I had the pleasure and opportunity to be here live, and honestly, I had to kind of control myself because I got very emotional in listening to the messages. Resonated with me at such a core level. When, David, you were talking about looking back 19 years, you know, looking back into 2000, 2001 and where we're at, and then looking at this last year, and it meant a lot to me at a soul level, because I could see how right now, this precise moment, especially leading into this full moon, what's happening with these energies. And I know that I've had conversations with people recently, other creators, and this is what I've been feeling as well. This interesting energy of this duality and balancing of the masculine and feminine energies within us. And with what Sarah was just mentioning, it's this interesting dynamic of a push and a pull. And so just as we were talking about, it's this weird place of having to take significant action, having to overcome significant fears at the same time of having to surrender through moments of opposition and what's no longer serving us. So even today, just today, I was experiencing a lot of different oppositional energy within me. Had a live stream that just went kaput, couldn't even work. And I had to, in that moment, choose, am I going to be frustrated and anxious and not understand what is happening at this precise moment? Or am I going to surrender and look within and ask, why am I experiencing this? What am I supposed to learn from this moment? And from there, transitioned into listening to your Deep Astrology show that was just kind of download and channel after channel for me tonight. And then after that, having a very interesting and dynamic conversation with Dylan about human design. And it allowed me to just see the beauty of, through that moment of surrender and opposition, allowing then my soul to experience some very beautiful moments that I was meant to experience this evening.
That's beautiful. I love that. Abby Moneyhun's in the house.
Hey.
What do you got going on with all this, Abby?
I have never felt more empowered or strong in my life. I feel like I've got, it's been like one of the hugest transitions of my life, to go from like this very weak and unempowered state to like finally like feeling the self-worth. And I follow the galactic cycle really closely, and I just hit this 52-year cycle point, which in galactic code they believe that every single year you travel around the sun, and on July 25th you take a step up, and then you go for another trip around the sun. And they believe that it takes 52 years to complete this spiral of life. And so for me, just turning 52, I have completed that spiral. And it's now time to start a new spiral. And what I'm realizing is that the spiral of life, we think that things are going to change really quickly. You know, like I remember it was probably in 2012 when I was listening to you as I was going through some of the hardest times of my life. And I remember you saying, you know, it's time to purge, it's time to, you know, get rid of all this stuff. And I thought it was something that I could purge in maybe a week, you know, or a month. I never dreamed in a million years it would take years of purging, years of renewal. And I think it's important to remember right now in this cycle that we are now in a new beginning phase that we're coming up on. And that doesn't mean that overnight things are going to change and be bliss, you know, but it means that we get into the cycle, and we go with the cycle, and we go with our perception of things and trust that we can change our perception and feel more comfortable through it, you know. And I guess that's where I sit right now. I'm okay with everything that's happening because I know it all leads to something, and we don't have to know what the something is, because everything's okay as long as we're here, you know, breathing and working through it.
Yeah, I love that. I also think there's that aspect of like not only what is on the other side, but whatever it is that shows up to cross this bridge and how it looks.
Right.
Kind of not getting your ego in the way or getting this, you know, it has to be this way to cross this bridge. There's so many, and I love that you bring up this galactic cycle, because isn't it in the Mayan thing, the July 25th, they call it the Waib cycle or something. I was born in that, and it's like, because I'm July 23rd, and all the other days in the cycle are 20-day cycles, and that's only a 5-day cycle, right?
Yeah. And
but they say it's almost like bad, those 5 days.
It's not, it's void.
Yeah, they call it the world between spirit.
Yeah,
like it's the veil.
Day out of time. You know how they used to say a day in a year? Mm-hmm. You know, there's that saying, a day in a year. It's completely void. There's nothing, so that we can take a step up. And I made a post about this the other day on Instagram on the High Vibe page, because from an empty state, that's the only way we can be filled up. If you have a cup, you cannot pour anything into it, or you can only fill up pieces of it if it's not empty. Like if you get a glass of wine and you finish it, you cleanse it all out so that you can have a new wine. You don't just pour wine, fine wine, into another fine wine's glass. You know, so that it can have its purest essence. And so I think if we remember that we are these open chalices right now, you know, and from that place, we get to turn things to gold, because we get to refill with this. It's like a new essence of all the accumulated knowledge and wisdom that we have. And now we get to bring that to the plate. And how are we going to play with that knowledge?
Yeah.
You know, it's from this point that we actually get to experience what it's all about.
It's true. It's true.
It's true.
Yeah, I always thought that cycle, when I found out I was born in that Waib cycle, I was like, it's like basically your life must be spirituality, one.
Yeah.
And it was like, two, like you have to be kind of, you like are a true channeler of the spirit world, and that they stop on those 5 days. They don't do anything.
No.
Back in the Mayan, you know, galactic system, because there were spirits that were coming through and in and out. It was like a weird portal.
The interesting thing about your code is David is his like mission in life is, what it says is, he polarizes in order to question. Polarize in order to question. And in the galactic code, question is the quest ion. And so David gets this intellect and information at a level that he gets to, you know, outpour this intelligence. And some people are going to relate to it, and other people are going to be pissed off by it.
Oh, I love doing that shit.
I know. But either way, once they're polarized, then they get to go on their quest.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Dylan, we need some spirit advisor energy in here, I would say.
Here I am.
What are you feeling? I'd love to get your open book right now on everything.
Yeah. Just kind of piggybacking on everything that's already been said, I feel like there is a really strong polarity happening with our beliefs and our egoic self. I feel that the universe is almost being like, oh, you believe all these high-minded things about what you're capable of and da-da-da-da, but can you make it past this trigger, this 3D AF trigger of the most annoying, petty, whatever the case may be, and can you laugh at it? Because if you can laugh at it, then you've mastered Sagittarius, which is just presence and ever-flowing movement of the light of consciousness. But if you can't laugh, right now probably feels like a kind of Mercury retrograde energy, where things are just blowing up and snagging and not working out. And I think it's because we're being called, especially by this full moon coming up, we're being called to kind of bring the vision, like that Sagittarian far-flung vision of our life, into a really cohesive and like sporty package. So like if it's unwieldy, if it's dragging along, if it's, you know, keeping you from entering that doorway because you've got too many things on your back, you know, it's all got to be refined into something that's handy, you know.
It kind of reminds me, I mean, I know you're in human design. It kind of reminds me of 5-1 of like just being open at this moment up here, right? Because it's interesting to me that the full moon's happening after a bunch of crazy transits, right? In a very positive, with Jupiter in its home sign, and we're not going to see that again for 12 years. So, I mean, does that make sense to you at all, or?
Totally. Well, I think those crazy transits are like the triggers that we're feeling, like the trip wires and the blind spots. I think is a huge part that I've been personally experiencing, is like having a large frequency of like activation and clarity in a certain area of life, but then having things that I thought I was done with like years ago come back and really be a source of irritation and frustration, and actually a great chance to like question myself and like, not question myself, but inquire within and ask myself, why are these things still triggering me? Where's the real trigger there? Because it's my trigger, it's not anyone else's trigger. And so being able to look at those pieces of you that are still kind of clinging on to some kind of smaller egoic win when there's such a big win on the table is important right now, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to look at it. I also think when we take all these different looks, whether it's astrology, human design, galactic code, everybody's personal opinions or emotions, that it kind of is like, it feels like this energy that is right now, it really has been a percolation point in so many different levels. You know, Terrence McKenna did a lot of work with time wave zero with computers, where he was able to see in time that the compression of, you know, millenniums or certain big periods of time were all collapsing at 2012, and then it came to a 0 point basically, and we've been on this 0 point kind of afterwards. But I feel like there keeps being more and more compression, if that makes sense. Kind of how an MP3 works, right? You take the file, and the reason why they made MP3s was because it was like Napster. It was like, we need to get a file of a music to a user, and they're on 56K, so we need to compress the crap out of it in order for you to have this data that still is big. But we are all being compressed from past, like, patriarchal, the old systems, the old beliefs right now. Because I don't know, I want to get all your guys' opinion about the belief systems about people right now, whether it combines the religious also with the old system, and how I think there's a big connection to both at the same time, which I think is hard for people to deal with both at the same time, because I think it's hard to deal with, you know, what your lineage and religion elements are, and just the world in general that kind of goes across any religion of how, what integrity is now, what is. So I'd like to get all your guys' opinion and kind of do a real round table. If anybody just kind of wants to jump.
I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. And I left that religion when I was 30. And so religion to me is, maybe it's different than what some people would view religion. It was, you know, like basically a way of life that I thought was God, you know, so like the judgment from the religion and things, I would think was God judging me. And I think the thing that shifted, you know, just from a perspective of religion versus spirituality, is that all those filters that were here that made things right or wrong have changed. You know, like for humanity, it's not just a specific religion. You know, it's like we're coming out of a age of just accepting dogma, and we're actually questioning. And it's okay to question. And maybe it's always been that way. You know, I don't know if we've always had the right to question, but people that are in intense religions, and that's their way of life, I feel like they're starting to feel like, what's really going on here? Because like a lot of those religions foretold that it was going to be, you know, the end of a cycle a long time ago. You know, like that religion believed that it was gonna, the generation that was from 1914 would see the end and have this new paradise at that point. And I think that the translation of it changed, because the reality of it is that is what's happening. It's just that it didn't happen overnight. You know, we're watching this paradise come. We're watching transition, but it was like translated.
Yeah, misinterpreted here a little bit. That was the Industrial Revolution, which was an extreme leap in mankind, but also at the same time it brought about a bunch of things that mankind was not, I think, prepared for, which we're dealing with today still.
Right.
That, you know, especially with environmental, or whether, I think, especially when it comes to mental health, I know it's been a big thing with Rachel on the network, and even like the shadow work that that Sarah's doing is like, it's not easy being a human in this industrial kind of revolution, leaving the earthly realms that we were really connected with and being completely taken out of that. For some people, completely in a city 24/7 in a concrete building or in this and then like, you know, a tree in a garden, but like not like I remember I grew up here in Southern California. Our like joke is like our animals that are wild are the crow and the seagull. Like that's what I had to deal with. You know, it's like, gosh, seagulls pooping on my car. You know, like, so when I went out in the wilderness and Indian guides when I was young, man, when I saw my first grizzly bear or, you know, I was like, what? And I think when you look at like the spiritual aspect of life and where humanity's at now, when you have that many billions of people involved in this much industrialized form, which I feel the new age is moving the industrial age to more of this. I mean, you could call it the tech age, but I think it's not. I think so many people are worried about the tech stuff. I think humanity is going to has learned enough from this industrial revolution that, you know, before we jump so far, are we really ready to like go that far with just kind of thinking later and doing it now? I don't think we had ever gone to that point, except I guess in Rome maybe, but I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, I just want to hear more about this like belief, religion, old world thing.
I'll take a crack at it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So similar to Abby, and I know similar to others here as well, I too grew up in a very staunch, strict religious household. I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as many people know as Mormon. And so, of course, with that, not just the institution of the religion, but within that religion then came also a firm support and like the institutions of marriage, there's so many different institutions that we're facing today. And I find it particularly interesting, both myself, as well as I know you, David, and so many other creators who are of the generation that have Saturn and Pluto and Scorpio. It's been very interesting to watch, not just within myself, but on social media and all these places where we've seen this great like resurgence of people really trying to break out from these molds of the traditions and teachings of their youth, whether that's just religious or other types of social or political institutions. And just this is of my personal opinion here. I do not preach this to be doctrine, but I find it interesting to see how there's been a great swing in the pendulum. So many of us, not all of us certainly, but many of us, especially of the generation I spoke of, were raised being shown these ideas of these institutions, that this is the way that it needs to be and this is how it's always been, and what many of us experienced then was actually a bit of a dichotomy, that what we were being taught was not what we were seeing. And then there's been kind of a big surge of people wanting to fight against the system. And you hear a lot of people talking about breaking down these traditional foundations and these organizations and old structures or paradigms. And so then I just see everything, and there's opposition in all things, that this pendulum is swinging. And people were here, and then they've swung way over here, and now we see many people trying to find a home somewhere in the middle, to say, hey, I'm not quite sure that these institutions of my youth really resonate with me anymore, whether it's religious or otherwise. However, I don't know that I really resonate with the other side of the pendulum either. So let me listen to my own inner expert, my own inner guide, and find out what resonates as truth for me, what feels right for me. And so that's my thoughts on it, is that as we experience this kind of, it's not really a breakdown of all the systems, but rather like a restructuring of them. And I think that we're all collectively co-creating this new reality of what that looks like, and that we don't necessarily need to kill or die off all of these old institutions that have taken so long to be formed. However, an acceptance and a surrender to that not everything that has functioned or worked in the past is optimal or premium for the future.
I like that. I think especially you hit home with home. Ironically, Craig and I, before we just went live here, a year ago, we were in Nashville when I did the U.S. tour last year, and I went through 6 cities. And when I was in Nashville, it was, what was it? It was the Fate Train USA tour, and each one had a theme. And the theme for Nashville was home and family. And what I brought up in there was I saw in the future here, especially with all this Cancer North Node, this Mars, and this Jupiter square Neptune, was that the spiritual community does not have a home, number one. So, but religion and a lot of these belief systems do have homes. And so it's easy, I think, for like people really in the religious element to look at the New Age and look at New Agers and go, well, yeah, it's just like really devilish or really negative and bad, and the search for truth, I guess you could call it. But I also think that without a home, we're getting conflicts within the spiritual community. We're getting conflicts from religions to other religions right now that are playing out on more of a mainstream systematic function. I'll just call it spade to spade. Like the Muslim-Christian war is getting extreme again. And this is a time where is that unity between all of it in one that's going to be found? Which I think that's what's going to be the end of what people kind of get to the conclusion of, is that people always ask me, why do you wear a cross when you do astrology? You know? And it's like, well, I grew up Christian, but two, the cross to me is the sun walking on the water through the seasons of the cross that understand. Like, so there's a lot of different forms to me that I identify with of integration of all the aspects of it all. So I like that you brought up that home, but I think the spiritual community is trying to find a home. But even in homes, look at what happened with Christianity or even Islam, right? There's like all these sects that move out, right? Like, oh, well, I'm going to be extreme over here, or we're going to go extreme over here, you know? So in even the spiritual community, there won't be just this one home that everybody's like going to get perfectly along. There's going to be people who go, no. You know, there's retreats that I know that they're like, nobody's allowed to bring any bad food, no soda, no nothing. Everybody's going to drink water and only eat vegan. And that's the only way the retreat's going to be. You know what I mean? To where then there's like retreats like mine where I'm like, we're going to dance, we're going to have fun. And if anybody's not going to have fun, then I'm still going to love you or whatever. So I think that we're kind of in a weird space with all of it. And I think everybody's kind of internally questioning it all at the highest point ever.
I have something. I have, from what Rachel was saying, and then back to what you were saying, what came to me when you were talking about the pendulum swinging was, it relates to home. I got the image of like our root chakra and survival, and that being the old paradigm is really based in these lower chakras of survival. And that was also where religion blocked, was at the sacral, sexuality, connection, emotion. And then, you know, swing to the spiritual community, like ascension, 5D. We have these elevated conversations, but they're intellectualized. They're not grounded. We're still just talking about it. And there's still, like he said, there's no home. So there's still this like, where is the home? So then I was like, well, integration then would be coming back to the middle, which is the heart. And that is what feels like is happening right now, is that we can have these things that we label as right, truth, all of this stuff, but it's like, but is it actually bridging connection? Is it actually bringing us closer together? Is it actually bringing us peace? Is it bringing us joy, like true joy? And I think that's where, like, that's what's waking people up. And I know for me personally too, like I have definitely swung all the way, you know, from being a pharmacist and then all the way in Nebraska, and then all the way to being an astrologer, a shadow work coach in California. Like that's a good swing. And at the end of the day, if I can't show up and just have an honest, loving, heart open conversation because of, like what Dylan said, small triggers, you know, it's like, that's what's happening right now, is we have to really grow up, you know, grow up and be like, what is truth, and what is spiritual, what is home? I think a lot of it's up right now, but we're all like in this like good vulnerable place, if that makes sense.
But I want to know, Dylan, your roots.
My roots?
Of your spiritual roots in your belief systems to get to where you got.
I've just been following what makes sense to me since as long as I can remember. I did not grow up in a religious household. I grew up in an anti-religion household. So there was a strong emphasis on thinking for yourself and a strong reminder that we inevitably are responsible for our own lives, and that was the main focus. And it's been interesting because I've actually been somebody that's brought more of that emphasis on like the great mystery aspect of things into the consciousness of my roots, of my family. So
you and I are the same too. My family was not religious, and I just followed wherever. I went to Christian youth group just because, to be honest with you, I had a skateboard and everybody said that the chicks went, and we all would try and impress them with skateboarding afterwards after we watched VeggieTales. But I did find Christian ska music, which is one of my favorite music, and I still listen to Christian ska a lot. But yeah, and I learned a lot about the Bible and a lot about the teachings, and I just kind of was like, okay, it was in the back of my head, but it was astrology that connected a lot of those things.
But here's what was dawning to me when you were talking, when everyone was talking, is that we're in this this shift from Piscean to Aquarian age. And that has a lot to do with belief systems and a lot to do with this mistaken belief that we're here to find one person to be our connection point to Source, God, the universe, etc. And that was very Piscean, and I think a lot of us, all of us in humanity right now are just trying to reconcile this old model of looking to one source of the light, and also kind of feeling that maybe we too are that source of light, or that we have a direct connection. So I think it's almost like there's all these little like jacks on the ground, like pokey little petty belief systems, yet at the same time, as a collective spirit, I think humanity is starting to like look up and see that the jacks have nothing to do with the sun that's shining above them. That is the source. So it's like we're learning how to grow up, step over the games that we play with our egos and with this separation consciousness. My belief and my Messiah is greater than your Messiah, whatever the case may be. And just realize that, why do we want religion in the first place? What are we looking for in the first place? Connection, joy, love, community, etc. And I think that as more people tune into like the practical pursuit of what they're actually looking for, and less about the ideology in front of it, the veil of Neptune in front of it, we're just naturally, kind of in a grassroots way, beginning to find each other and open up ceremony as something that we have a right to, and to open up sacred space as something that's ordinary, that's not like, such a specially reserved, privilege for a select few, or a select belief system, or a select whatever. So I think it's happening really organically, just by people being like, I felt more connected at that gong bath, than I did at 30 years in church, or like whatever the case may be. Or maybe they're having the gong bath in the church. Maybe the new spirituality that is more human-based than idea, belief-based, props up right in the husk of the old, of churches and mosques and synagogues.
I want to get your guys' opinion of. So this is polarizing. So that ex-New Ager that did all the cards, she has her YouTube channel, and she put out a video this weekend saying Reiki, Christians should not practice Reiki. And then they also did another video on there saying there's like this one church, I forgot the name of it, but it's doing like, it's teaching people to be like psychic. They have like Christian cards of what God's connecting to you with. And they were like really like damning it to hell. Because it was interesting that you brought up people doing gong ceremonies in church. Like, actually, there's some churches kind of integrating this stuff. And then there's this whole, like, I'm not swaying off my biblical form only. And I think your point of the Piscean veil is like, it's Neptune, but it's also Jupiter, which is so weird. Because it's like, this is like the peak of just all these people with all these different viewpoints that really do make up a beautiful understanding when you take in all of it. But also at the same time, it can be like the journey to nowhere or the journey to eternal somewhere. It's a kind of like a weird paradoxical thing, but it's a little polarizing because there's a lot of people kind of saying that this is the only way. That makes sense. And I don't.
There's still like a huge business side to spirit and belief as well. I think people, whether they be the most new age or the most religious, by the book, there's always been a huge tie between money and spirit. And I think that some people are polarizing because it brings them views and income. And, sometimes like what we see is somebody having like a big awakening over their spiritual beliefs. Maybe they're just realizing that this demographic isn't paying as well as this demographic. So they're going to switch it up a little. Which is just my 2 cents.
Flop like 2 fish. Bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
Which I think it's okay to flip flop. Like, it's about like, I think being compassionate to, if that's your beliefs, that's your beliefs. Like, cool. I'm not going to go to war to you about it though,
Yeah, I think too, like, it's interesting because the word safety keeps coming up to me, and I'm like, what's driving somebody to feel the need, right, to like force other people to believe what they believe, which if they, in that sense, they are believing in the ideal, the Godhead, that image, they're finding safety there. Like, that is why I think that we attach to any kind of, that's another part of religion, is we're actually looking for safety and this like way out of death, right? And I feel like anything that is inducing fear in somebody else, that's driven by you have to do this or else, and it's this threat, I think it's really good if we question that. Whether it's on a really small scale level of like, you should be afraid that if you leave this job, you won't survive, or, I mean, you know what I mean? Like these, like, it could be a small threat, like a little jack on the floor. It could be this huge claim, like you're going to hell or something. But it's like, we are all going to die. Like, and that is like, ugh. But I think safety is being recreated by accepting that, like, we're here, and like this kind of acceptance of loss and change and whatever that we can't control. And like, that's where it's the power right now is turning towards fear. Like Mars and Cancer, North Node, it's like there's also this fearlessness, this warrior spirit, and it's going to try Neptune. It's like there's this pioneering energy to like break free from that. Yeah, I just had to throw that in there.
I think it's so interesting that she did come out with her beliefs, because like it's impacted you drastically, right? Because you bring her up a lot.
Yeah, I bring her up because there's nobody else bringing another side. Not that it's trying to battle, but just as like, okay, there's a lot of people affected. If you read, she had to disable comments on the videos because, I mean, preaching and doing, cards that everybody has, and then doing schools and teaching people that this is the way, and then retracting from it that's fine. But then presenting a new belief and then not wanting to hear what people have to say, and then cutting them off, and then presenting fear, like you will go to hell now from what I was telling you, and then just asking to say sorry, which I will still be compassionate. But there's nobody vocally putting this out to anybody out there. There's nowhere.
What I appreciated about what she did, like if you look at the silver lining of it, is it made me go back and examine what I really believe.
Yeah.
Like I went and I read the scriptures that she quoted, and I had to go really deep, because the first thing when I listened to it was fear. Was like, oh my God, what have I allowed myself to, believe in? But the reality was, by that deep questioning, I come to a realization in my own heart. And I think that's what all of us need to pay attention to, is it's not even what other people are saying, but It's that conversation that you're having in your head as someone else is talking. Because if somebody does something that triggers you or that irritates the freaking bejesus out of you, it's like, go deep into why. Why, only the things that deeply impact us trigger us.
And you know what? You just bring up, because I went through all my beliefs too, but in 2016, doing Age of Deception, where I presented 5+ hours, and it's on YouTube for free, of basically saying the deception of the last 2,000 years of religion and the stories and the regurgitation of them, and it's all connected to alchemy, hermetic alchemy, divinity, whatever you want to look at it like, that there is this regurgitated story kind of being reenacted in so many ways. And there's the fear that was projected on people of leaving any of those spaces to really go and seek and find the truth in yourself. There's like this, anytime I think anything is fear-based, like, oh gosh, it's like, if I do this, I'm going some really dark place. Like, it really is scary to me. It reminds me of this old movie. It was actually George Lucas's first, THX 1138. Or there was another one called with Christian Bale called Equilibrium. I don't know if you all saw that one, where they started injecting people with being numb so they wouldn't have emotion anymore. Like, it really starts for me to see in the future, when it's, to me, that's like radical beliefs. When you stick in one direction, it's not a belief anymore. It's like it's a vindication or something. And I feel that with Jupiter and Sag, and what Jupiter represents is being open constantly and exploring and expanding for truth. And that's something that there is no such thing as a religion that has the truth. If you look at any religion, like, it doesn't ever come to this end backstop with any Gemini facts or any of the data that is shown or any of the beliefs that are shown. I mean, let's be real. All of the texts and all of the, especially if we're sitting with like Christianity or actually Catholicism, which is where it started, is really based upon people channeling this information.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, if you think about it, I haven't looked at the statistic lately, but there's over 3,000 religions in the United States alone. And so many of them believe that they're the true religion. That's why they go faithfully, to see these beliefs. But it's often made me wonder, like, as I started hearing other things, like about I don't even know how you say, is it Anunnaki or?
The Anunnaki. That was last week's show. Last week's show was great.
We talked about that last week, and that belief system really impacted me, because the belief system was that this outer planet, well, I don't know the whole belief system, but this outer planet, was the main god that then had these sons, and that there was a god of the planet Earth. And if this really is the case, like, if you look at this like really huge picture, and we're not just talking about Earth and the sun and like our little solar system, but if you look at this from a galactic space, it makes me wonder if humanity, if that was the case, and they knew that in this bigger picture that maybe it was really the goal to annihilate humans. It didn't matter if you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist. It doesn't matter your race, your color. Humans. We're going to annihilate humans because we want to take over planet Earth. What do you think humans would do to unite together at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Ronald Reagan put out and said, that's the only way. He said at the UN that he feels that people would come together is if an outside force attacked us. That's why he created Star Wars.
I think that...
Not the movie, but the military satellite system that was going to shoot down missiles during the during the whole, Cold War from Russia, but it was also a system that was going to be in place to protect humanity in a way.
When you think about it from that perspective, and then you think about the little piddly argument that you got in with your kid, or the, like the drive to work and this person cut you off in traffic, it seems like nothing, compared to a huge picture of humanity that really should be collected together to enjoy each other's company and to, be a huge human tribe.
I agree, but I also think that a lot of these religions and I think a lot of these beliefs were all like tests as to see how humankind and consciousness can attach so much to something that creates division, but also at the same time, it's looking like everything based off what has been projected, especially since the space program, since Pluto-Uranus conjuncted in the 60s, which we then went into the Apollo missions to the moon, ironically enough. And then Star Wars comes out. You have to remember also Stanley Kubrick did 2001, A Space Odyssey, which he's the one who showed us the whole idea of a spaceship, like going out into whatever, and his own idea, and then the computer turning on him, David, that this has all been implanted for what I believe, and I might sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist now, but I do believe that the biggest test will be this false sense of an alien invasion or some sort of like alien sickness or some sort of alien this, or even saying that these are really where you come from with no validation, to create a new belief system of like, we're all from here and here's some data that was not verified by except this very top people, and then everybody believes it. But it's ironic that in the Bible it even says like, don't kind of believe the first thing, like, like there's a lot in a lot of different of these religions too that have kind of like this, make sure you check the data before you believe in this whatever we call revelation period that comes up. But it's ironic that nobody's doing that to the own religion in which they're in. Like, that's the weirdness.
And David, I think when you're mentioning with the aspect of the aliens, and I actually think so much of the time, like, religion gets a bad rap for this kind of dogmatic view of this is so and this is so, but it actually happens, I find, a lot even within the spiritualist community too. With certain things, I get questions as an integrative health coach. I'm always looking at how to integrate this mind, body, spirit, and of course messages are always based about the individual and in self-empowerment, listening to that own inner expert and guide and never giving your power over to anyone or anything. So from that perspective, even within the spiritualist community, just like within many religions, there seems to often be these messages of a one-size-fits-all, of this is the right way. And I love that you had mentioned earlier about the different retreats and how at your retreat, if someone wants to drink Sprite, they can drink Sprite. And when you were mentioning about gongs, Dylan, in the chapels, there are actually different Christian faiths. I know of one well-known preacher in particular who incorporates astrology into a very, very staunch Christian house, a church. So it's cool. There are people, even within religion, that are expanding and opening. And then I think within the individual as well, even if you do not resonate with religion, but you're within the spiritualist community, I get questions from clients all the time about how to have a spiritual ritual practice, and that they heard you need to cleanse crystals this way or do it this way. And is that the only right way, Rachel? I get asked. And I say, well, what do you think? It's always going to be that kind of minimalistic approach or authentic approach. What feels right to you? And I even tell my daughter, I love it. I tell her to question everyone and everything, including mom. And because there are so many times as human beings, we're intermixing opinion with as fact and different things, and because we all have our own perception, our own experience here on this earth. And so at the end of the day, I just think it's so important that whether you're looking at religion or you're looking at a more modern, esoteric, spiritualist type practice, asking yourself, does this resonate as truth? Does this feel right? Does this feel practical for me? And when you mention about the cross and astrology, I too, like I subscribe to so many different methods and tools because I view them as tools. So I really would like to extend the message to anyone. If you feel like you do want to still incorporate teachings of your youth, scripture, ancient scripture and text, at the same time that you've got some crystals and you've got some tarot and you're looking at the astrological charts, that's okay. You get to do you. I think that's where we kind of need to come to this place, is there is not a one size fits all, at least in my personal opinion. And so personally, I have a very eclectic spiritual practice, and I know that that confuses people sometimes, but if we can all just give each other that space, that there is not this one truth, maybe within religion and also not within the spiritualist community.
Yeah, I love that. Dylan, with human design, when it comes to combining so many layers, like I watched this show on Amazon. It was about, what's the show name, Craig? The one where they become it's like the other dimension where the Nazis won. The what? Oh, the Man in the High Castle. The Japanese, one of the guys from Japan uses the I Ching a lot. Like every day he would like use the I Ching, and he'd be able to like see what was going to happen. Where does this I Ching, with the matching of the astrology on top, bring out this whole place in where this belief system thing, does it offer a system of understanding when it could come to a place where it's like, okay, finally this is over? Or is it the ages that purely you would use? Or is there things in human design for future telling? Because what I love about you is that you use human design more than I see it most. It's like most human design people are just like, okay, this is your human design, this is who you are, and here's your, your key, and here's your gate, and that's whatever. You're like going in every direction with it.
Multi-directional. Yeah. So there's so many layers to this, but as I'm listening, I'm always thinking too. The I Ching and how it relates to the solar wheel of the zodiac is one layer, and it's kind of a predictive tool in the sense of what are the minds of humanity going to be emphasizing, programmed with during a certain epoch. We can look at that on a daily level with the transits like you do in astrology. And we can look at the larger cycles that we're going through, which have a huge subconscious influence on what drives the collective. So not just what individuals are thinking about and dealing with, but what are the movements of the genes of that time period. Because when we get to the I Ching, what we're actually looking at is a mirror of the human genetic code. And we're looking at, in human design, how astral transits are programming specific genetic activations within a single individual or the collective consciousness. So with the whole idea of religions and belief systems, it really reminds me of this transit of Pluto that is occurring currently. Right, right, and it's actually Pluto in the gate of inner truth. And in human design, because Pluto has this extremely slow orbit, what it's actually doing when Pluto goes through a gate is it's shutting off that gene. So it's like a delayed shut-off switch, because obviously you have to have an ending before you can have a new beginning. So what is Pluto shutting off in the collective consciousness right now? The search for inner truth. It's literally in the gate of inner truth, and it's deactivating the drive in humanity to even find a truth that's outside of ourselves, which is obviously what religion is based on. So I think that there is a collective anxiety right now. People are feeling the door to truth closing, and they're scrambling to be the one, and as we still kind of are influenced by the fight or flight, hierarchical left brain past of survival of the fittest, everyone's trying to claim that they're the fittest religion, that they're the perfect belief system, that they're the doorway, the actual doorway to truth, when in actuality, that's just leaving the game altogether. Because I don't think people realize it, but in 2027, which is very close, the game is shifting so drastically that we can't even fathom it, actually. We can't even fathom it. And so right now, we're purging. We're just in a purge storm. Physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, especially. And it's chaos. It's just chaos. There's obviously order within it, but there is just so much overdue work being done in this small window that it's like, that's why we feel these huge shifts in a day. Yet there's still a lifetime of work to be done, because it's very quantum, and we're kind of like a sacrificial generation. We're doing a lot of clearing work because what's coming is so different, it needs a nice clean break from the past in order to be fully fledged. And it's the next evolution of consciousness and form. So, you know.
Which makes sense, because especially you understand astrology, or even I think in I Ching, like there is a cusp between the moment of then switching probably to the next I Ching, or same thing in a sign, right? Like the cusp. And then if you look at the 2012 galactic shift, right, the cusp of the sun's coming up over the equator. Yeah.
Born into that time out of time, where there's special conditions, you know, that aren't usually in play. And crap, there's one more thing I wanted to say, but I think I lost it.
Well, I was just on that whole cusp thing. It's like, when you're at the cusp of something, I always say it's like, you know, like, I mean, it's literally like if you take your car to drive, right? You get in the car, it's pretty easy. You go on a long drive, let's say, it's that moment right before, you know, you're about to arrive that was always the most like weird, and then you switch into the new environment and the new thing, and then it kind of, you know, dies off. But it kind of gets to this high point of like, this has been such a long drive. This has been
Right. It's like coming up on a psychedelic where you're not actually getting that fully fledged, cool, like tripping feeling, but you're just feeling it like work through your system, and it's like, whoa, what's happening to me? It's kind of like that. We're like really feeling this big leap we're about to make, which is what all these spiritual doctrines are writing about. They're like the prophecies are all referring to this time when we unify under spiritual truth, that, you know, maybe the rainbow warriors come, or whatever the case would be. We're about to jump into a visceral, literal experience of unity consciousness. And these new beings being born are going to be the ones bringing it to us post-2027. But
why do you think the decline in the birth rate has happened? You think it's because of this general anxiety, collective conscious-wise, too?
This is talked about in human design, actually, the birth rate, and how it's simply because we're reaching the end of a certain chapter in humanity. The Homo sapiens vessel is pretty much almost done with its job, which is to carry over the genetics and consciousness to this next vessel, which is going to be a nine-centered being that's purely group consciousness. And so it's like the literal life force of the planet is like, okay, we're shutting down here because something else is coming, and it's going to need this energy. And also, I think because there's so many beings planet-side, and every one of those beings has a core crystal from the core of the Earth. You know, Gaia is like running at full capacity. She's like, I don't think we need any more people up here. So
it's interesting to me because I've noticed America, well, a lot of Western countries, it's gone way down. And even in China, I remember they were having those problems where it was like, you need to keep it to 2 or keep it to 3. And even that's kind of right now like diminishing.
It's like the tribal laws are breaking down. You know, all these things within our genetics that were necessary for us to get here, which is like, okay, we've got to make more of us so they can work the fields and defend us and do things like that. Now we're in this societal safety net where everything is kind of pumped to us, at least in the Western world. And we're seeing that we don't need kids to like guard the village or anything like that, or like go hunt and farm. I think that's a big part of it. And I think it also speaks to how these codes are just being shut off in humanity.
Yeah, I also think, you know, there's the doomsday clock, and when Trump got elected, it was like they threw it to like 30 minutes before, 1 hour before doomsday, basically. And then I was like, how is one person going to shift the world's doomsday clock, right? And then they moved it back, because I think that really if you start to take in this whole idea that there's doomsday, the whole 2012 thing of making movies of this like catastrophic, like it was going to be earthquakes and the seas falling, and like there's just this whole thing of like this transformation that you just were speaking of. And I like how you bring up the energy of that the vessel needs the energy of what we're holding to basically integrate with it. That instead of this looking at it like a doomsday scenario, it's quite the opposite, really.
It's a birth.
Yeah.
So,
Which
yeah.
is traumatic. I mean, I'll never have a baby out of me.
Let's hope not.
But yeah, let's hope not. But I mean, that's a lot. Birthing is.
It's huge. And
It's huge.
It changes your identity too. Like.
Well, I mean, Abby, you have kids. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like.
Birthing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's no way to describe it. But in all the pain, there's also wonder. You know, and I think that's the key to keep in mind, like with even discussions like this, because, you know, there's opinions and we don't know. That's the bottom line of it. We don't know. You know, I'm in mastermind meetings where they believe that by the year 2023, humanity will be able to live to be over 700 years old, like each human, because of all the medical advancements with technology and stuff. And they've got plans to, you know, have homes in outer space and houses, you know, like in the oceans. And, you know, they've been figuring out all these ways to deal with, you know, population control. And so for me, I've been trying to just keep a really open mind to what birth could be. And I know that at the end of the day, we don't know anything as fact. We're having to let it unfold. You know, just like when you're having your baby, you know, you can see the ultrasound pictures and stuff, but you don't know what it looks like exactly until you look in its eyes. Yeah. And then that's when you feel like the home of love. You know, when you know, the essence that you can feel in your own heart. And I think that's what we all need to be remembering right now, because I see, you know, like comments even in the Deep Astrology tonight where people were saying, you know, like, I'm scared. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know the next move. I'm feeling extra jittery. I'm feeling extra anxious. I'm feeling irritated. You know, that was some of the words that was coming up. And so what I've been doing, like, this is kind of like switching into something we can do to alleviate some of that feeling. I've been watching how my dog reacts to this energy. Mm-hmm. And she's shaking a lot. You know how, like, if you pet a dog, how they like shake off? And I think that that's something that people could do to alleviate some of the jitter, is like literally, you know, like dance. You know, move about, shake off this energy, know that there is no pressure to figure it out.
Yeah.
We don't have to know. It's fun to hypothesize and, you know, try to figure out what could be. But the bottom line of it is, you know, like, don't make yourself crazy trying to understand, because when it's time to understand in your own body, you'll understand. You know, we get these moments that are absolute knowing for ourselves. And that's all we really have to trust, is that if we can relax into the knowing, we're going to know more. You know, we'll be able to flow a little bit easier if we can allow ourselves to, like, mentally disengage from the chatter of the what if. You know, like, if you're feeling anxious by this conversation. That's the only reason I'm bringing this up.
No, I'm glad that you are. It actually goes with the astrology, with this Neptune trine to this Mercury and Mars. It really is saying, like, I mean, you actually know by just whatever your feeling is and just accepting that and doing that.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with, is this right, with the Saturn stuff? Like, is this right? And then with Jupiter too, squaring Neptune, like, am I a sinner or am I a bad person? Am I just offering, is this all just bad luck? And how do I deal with that? Or there's a lot of things.
Well, and especially with empaths, like, they've got to remember that they're also picking up all the what ifs that everybody else around them is thinking. You know, so for some people it's very intense, and it may be more intense than what it really should be just as an individual, you know.
Yeah, and I wanted to say this. It's like, I have some family members I won't mention because they go through stuff and they've been going through some health stuff. But I've been noticing even in like medical world, right? That I think that, and then if I look at like being a kid and the textbooks we read, and there was this sense that the world, like we had it all figured out, right? But even now, like doctors are like, well, we're just gonna have to like dig in there, and I don't know what to do. We're just gonna have to like open you up, and then we've already done all our scans, we ran all your tests, but like something's happened that I don't know. We're just gonna open you up and see what happens. I don't know. We'll see what happens once we're in there. And I think that there's a terrifying feeling of that's what's been going on the whole time. Number one, you know what I mean? Like I remember before I went out for my hernia surgery when I was in the military, and you know they first like dope you up a little bit so you're at ease, and then I look over and he's opening up a textbook. It says like U.S. Navy health, like abdominal, like, you know, like thing. And he's just like opening up like, okay, we're going to do a hernia surgery. And I'm like, wait, what?
And David, in like all of this discussion that we've been having and in mentioning birth and fear, I was so many things, being pregnant myself right now, it's interesting because I get to hear, not even professionally, just personally, get to hear from a lot of different couples and women and different things when it comes to birth. Right now, with what's been happening astrologically, all of these transits and these energies, many people have sense of fear. They have a sense of uncertainty. Everything, the ground has just been energetically, has been continuously shifting from beneath us. And many people, you know, aside from the other comments that were made that I think are very valid when it comes to adding more life to this earth, I think many people are just like, how could I even possibly have a child right now? I don't even know if I want to stay in my job. How can I financially provide and even if they're feeling compelled to produce life and be able to take that step, they're then feeling trapped from these other 3D aspects, and there's this kind of self-oppressive energy, and they're not feeling like it's safe they're not even sure about their own footing, let alone bringing then a child into it. And then additional to that, with the even element of childbirth, again, it comes back to these old institutions and that's just the way it was done. It's been very interesting since I've chosen to do an natural at-home water birth, the reaction from many people, because there are so many different thoughts and feelings and perceptions about, well, what do you mean you're going to do it at home? And what if this happens? And what if there's an emergency? And, well, why aren't you going to go to the hospital? And why the hell would you not want to have drugs? Like, that's what they're there for. And it's just so interesting. That's just one example. But the reason I bring it up is because all of this other discussion, I feel like it plays perfectly into what's happening at a much grander scale and much further beyond just the topic of childbirth or bringing children into this world. It's a very good example of what's happening on so many levels within our lives, that many people are feeling trapped, they're feeling torn, they're feeling the duality of what they desire at a soul level versus what they've been told is just the way it's supposed to go or it's the way it's done. And it's created a lot of confusion within the individuals and within society. So again, it has to come back to that what feels right and that surrender to the universe at the same time of taking action. So if someone is feeling prompted at this time, whether it's to have a child or it's to leave their job or to move to a new place or to change their belief systems, whatever it is, if someone's feeling compelled to take action in those areas, now's the time to do it. And certainly not to allow fear to keep them or, you know, any of us oppressed or suppressed or trapped, because it's that, again, that weird energy of having to take action at the same time as having to surrender.
I have to tell you something. It makes me think of when I did have my sons, because I chose not to have any pain medication, you know, when I was going to have the birth, which in retrospect, I probably
no intravenous Sprite.
No, it was a bad. I mean, when I had Braxton, you know, I was in labor and I was bound and determined. I am just gonna, you know, go for this without anything this time. And about 3/4 of the way through the major part of it, I changed my mind and I was like, I want medicine. I just can't even go through this. And the doctor's like, it's too late. like if we give it to you now, it'll go straight into your baby's bloodstream. And I was like, oh my God. And he says, I'm going to tell you something. When you get to the point that you think that you can't handle it anymore, it'll be 10 minutes after that he's born. And sure enough, I mean, when it got to the point where it was just like, I cannot do this another single minute, that's when he came out. And I think that it's so true, like with this period that we're in right now, you know, because some of us are choosing to take medication. That if women take medication, I have nothing against that. You know, I think.
Oh, and neither do I.
Yeah,
I want to add that. That's a personal preference.
I think it is a personal preference, but it's just like in life with this birth that we're having. Some people are choosing to, you know, like numb out to it. Some people are choosing to face it head on. Some people are feeling like they're jittering out of their bodies. But the end result of it is that we're making forward movement as consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, we're evolving, and that collective choice is all molding together to bring about who knows what. It hasn't completely unfolded yet. And all we know is that if we have been working this hard to birth it, that it's going to be interesting to see. You know, it's like, even if it had a birth defect, we would still love it. You know, even if it was something that we hadn't planned for, you know, there's always a way, you know, to work around it. And that helps relieve some of the stress and the anxiety from it.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen this, like even with the whole high vibe thing.
I was going to bring that up earlier. It's like birthing this has been like, wow.
Yeah.
But
I feel like, too, on a very practical sense, I think that that's why, like, the work that I do is fueled because of the effect that it's had on my own life, on just learning how to sit with my own emotions, learning how to sit with my own discomfort, and not letting my mind hook into my emotions in order to create some sort of sense of escape, some sort of sense of safety outside of this moment. And I think the emotions right now are really intense. The collective wave is up. The fear is everywhere. And for the people at home who are like feeling fear, I like invite you to lean in, to actually like sit down and get still and breathe and ask, where is this feeling in my body? Where do I feel it? And can you breathe into it? And actually, by getting closer to it, you create more space within that. And so it's this dropping in to the present moment. It's this dropping into the discomfort. It's this just courage to just sit with it and to not need to do something with it right in that moment. So this power of observation and feeling, and Cancer North Node, like, we have got to learn how to feel our feelings, and we have to admit that we didn't learn that. Like, if we learned anything, it was like, do not feel your feelings, you know, like, especially if it's inconvenient time-wise or parent-wise or whatever. So this isn't like an overnight thing. Back to what Abby said in the very beginning, this is an individual moment-to-moment rewiring of our system, because we're still responding to traffic in fight or flight. We're still responding to watching a video in fight or flight, and we have the consciousness now to be able to name that. To just say, I can see myself feeling this right now. Because I'm also watching just emotions spilling everywhere, you know? And it's like, we're just like, well, can you just like take this frustration? You know, that's what we do. And we just like react on somebody. It's like, I have all this stress and I can't handle it. It creates mini wars that build bigger wars, but it's so simple. And yet it's so also Jupiter and Sagittarius, where it's like, it's the human spiritual quest, right? It's like this, like, being in the moment and like finding, we're all being called to deepen our faith and our sense of trust when we have no freaking clue what's happening moment to moment. We wake up and we're like, everything's fine, but I feel crazy, you know? So like the mind's job is to find evidence, is to find context, to give some sort of sense of safety by being like, this is what's causing that. But a lot of times, especially right now, that's actually really unhelpful. Like trying to figure something out or analyze something, especially those emotions, I feel like I just want to, on a very practical human level, it's okay to feel fear right now. Like, it's okay if you're in a place where like you don't know, it's okay to be afraid. Like, let yourself feel that without it being something that is identifying, or, you know, don't pile suffering on top of suffering. It's like what's coming.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up for the emotion you're feeling.
Well, and I kind of went in with this. So in 2010, and actually it was 2012 specifically, we had Pluto square Uranus. That was a 3-year cycle from 2012 to 2015. And that was a square point from the conjunction point of 64, 65, basically, of when they were together, which was kind of this Timothy Leary line of, you know, like, basically tune in, but like tune out. Like, it was kind of like, you know, get the fuck out of this society the way it is. But then it got challenged really intensely. And I think I was so, as an astrologer, like, this is going to be gnarly. Pluto square Uranus, like the battle between transformation and what needs to be done in the future. But now we're dealing with Saturn and Pluto with the South Node, which has never happened in Capricorn for over a millennium. So we're talking about this old, really old way of humans needing to survive in life, and the systems that were in place and the fears that were in place. So I don't think we've dealt with all that yet. We've kind of pushed it off, like how you were saying, to just feel the emotion, Sarah, and just instead of like throwing it off. Because when you were in 400 AD, let's say, it's like, well, I got to figure out my food today. And, you know, like, that was the stresses. It was the stress of getting this or that, or my kid's going to die in a month because just, I don't know, like, that's just what happens. There's just so much of that old fear and pain. And then we just went through so much already. And then it was like, over this last decade, that it's like, really? I you know, as an astrologer, I go, really? Now you're going to drop this too? Okay, all right. But I guess it's the point of true surrender and clearing that Dylan brought up to bring into this new form of humanity, or if it is evolution. Would you call it evolution, Dylan, or would you call it something different? I don't know if I like the term evolution.
It's evolution as well as involution. So it's the evolution of consciousness through matter, as well as the involution of spirit deeper into matter simultaneously.
Wow. Because I feel like evolution is missing something, which you just brought up.
Well, the widely accepted definition of evolution?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's for another show.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a comment here that's great. I don't know how you say it, Cara Birth, because she said, it's important to remember that women, for as long as humans have existed, have gave birth, or else you wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for us all to remember that the cycles of this earth, I mean, we're going back how many thousands and thousands of years? So it's like we have been in these cycles, you know, like sometimes I wonder why we do get so worked up over, you know, something that's just been happening for eons of time. You know, and we do overanalyze because we've gained more wisdom. You know, like as a collective, like the thought processes. Well, I've got to tell you this. I used to do this thing where I would like facilitate somebody going back to their source energy. And there was one specific code. They were all the like star-seeded people would come back with this story. Because what would happen is they would go travel to their source, then they would come back and we would just turn a tape recorder on and see what they heard or what they found when they were gone. And I always found this interesting because they said basically, everybody said the same thing. That's what was so ironic about it. Mm. They said what they would see is like humanity in their day-to-day life, even if it's like scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, is feeding information about what humankind is up to down here. And they said that all that information is basically like distilled into these little capsules that then there's a giant lineup of souls that all that distilled information goes into that soul comes down with this new knowledge, you know, this accumulated knowledge. And that's how then they go into problem solving for that, you know, that generation. But they come in with a wealth of knowledge. So it's like we do have, you know, like my generation doesn't have the wealth of that internal knowledge. You know, you can tap into it, but it doesn't come like with that intrinsic knowing as much as like this little, you know, like the little generation that's just come in. Like they're
not freaked out.
They're not. And they're wide-eyed and they're full of love. Some of them are anxiety-ridden, you know, because they get around us that are all, you know, like,
Yeah.
they're like, why can't you just calm down, you know?
Calm down.
I was going to say that this whole fear thing is so different than what I would say this last 7 years was with all the Scorpio. It was like, it was almost like terrifying, like to even just like face the world. But I feel like now it's like much more of just the 3D fear stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, when you actually look at it, I'm like, I'll take this fear over that more internal, transformational, fully coming into awareness fear, which I think if you've been doing your work, that's been a big part that's already been done. So it's like, this is now I like how that Dylan brings up, it's the involution first, I feel, that has to happen before the evolution can happen. And I feel like we're at the involution stuff. I don't know, you know?
It's simultaneous, right?
Yeah, But I would say that.
I think it takes turns.
Yeah, it does.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like the internal stuff was really scary this last decade. But the last couple of years, I feel like the internal stuff hasn't been that scary.
But when you look back on it, was it really that scary? You know,
Of course not. Well, any fear is never as scary as we really think it is. So
it's usually 50 scenarios of things that we think could happen that play out in the head that create.
It just feels like it's more externalized now, like about partnerships, about business, about money, about just like all these like 3D structural shit. And it's like, well, I never worried about that before, even though, because I didn't care. I was more worried about like, am I going to be okay right now? I'm just like getting through the day, like alive in my own soul. Like, you know what I mean? Like going to the bathroom was like, wow, I'm going to take a shower right now. What? It was almost like waking up into a different dimension or something. I don't know.
Well, it's just like giving birth. Boy, you have the baby, and you know, my kids are 23 and 25 now, and I can't even remember the pain. You know, at the time, I felt stuff going on. And I think that, you know, like even this last like 18-year cycle that I've just been through of, you know, feeling like I was walking through hell, you know, feeling like every part of my life was being dissolved. It's like standing at this point right now, looking back, it's hard to even recall the pain of it. And I think that if we can all remember that, you know, when we feel those moments of hurt or emotion, or it's like if you just stop and look at the facts of it, if you heard somebody else telling you that story, how would you feel? You know, would it be that big of a deal? Or how much of it has been made such a big deal because it's happening here in our temple, and we've spent so much time analyzing it that we're lost in it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I say we wrap up here and everybody kind of leave their last words here, what they have to say on this wrap up of a show I would call about the who knows.
The who knows.
What?
Well, I think that is such a great role modeling for everyone collectively as we go through gnarly amounts of change on levels that we may not even be fully conscious of. That, yes, birth is frightening because it is a cosmic force coming through a human body. And that's basically what's happening. And yet, people still have chosen to give birth for millennia. And the moms tell us that they don't remember the pain. They remember the beauty that was created from that birth more than anything. So when you feel like stuff is freaky and scary and you can't even trust the ground you walk on, just remember that this is part of the process that's going to lead to something that's greater than you can even imagine, that you definitely want to be a part of. So I know it's not going to like make the fear go away, because we have minds, but it's a good place to return to when it seems like all there is chaos. It's just one part of a metamorphosis.
That was beautiful.
It's so
It really was, though.
It is.
Yeah.
Did you?
Was Sarah gonna go?
Whoever,
can,
yeah,
yeah.
whoever.
I just saw her.
Okay, well, I feel like, kind of riffing off of the involution evolution thing, I think it's really important right now too to just note that we can work as hard as humanly possible to restructure something that is outside of ourselves, whether it's to make, you know, a live stream work or to run a studio or whatever it is. It's like, and until we work on the inside in equal measure and enthusiasm, like it will not evolve. And if it does evolve, it will fall out, because this is Saturn, Pluto in Capricorn South Node. It's like structures are being tested, and if they aren't built with roots, with like a solid system, they're crumbling, you know? And so, like, us included. So I just think like we have more power than we realize, and anything that feels externally, you know, challenging right now, it's like it's an invitation to strengthen something within, to kind of have that maturing within, or have that evolution within. And also, I would say, in like the humor part of Sagittarius is like, if your mind is going crazy, if you're like, oh my God, like you can feel that existential crisis feeling, like just pause for a moment. And what my friends and I do is we send each other gifs of Kermit freaking out. And it's like this image of the ego just being like, ah, you're gonna die. Like kind of like make light of it where you can, and let it be a bridge of communication or connection with other people. And yeah, like remember that, yeah, we all feel a little bit crazy or a lot of crazy, and it will pass. So yeah.
It's healthy to call out your own ego.
So healthy.
On a daily basis.
It is.
It's true.
It's true.
I think in closing for my thoughts with all of this is, sure, we've used the example of childbirth, which pertains for women, but male or female, all of us right now are giving birth to something. And David has his video out on this, you know, moving through the sphere into the paradise. So we, at least everyone I know that I've spoken to, at some core level is feeling this transition, is feeling that ground shaking, is feeling that something new, something bigger, something better is coming. And in those moments, in that darkest before the dawn, or I loved Sarah's thoughts on the emotions that we feel. I've always said that the best way up and out is deeper down and within. So even in a moment when there's crisis, where there's pain, and you don't know what to do with it, and it's scary, or it's hard, or it's hurtful, or frustrating, just even in that moment saying, I know it sounds really cheesy, but really just saying like, it's okay that I'm scared right now. It's okay that I don't understand what's coming. It's okay that I'm seemingly blindly taking action into the unknown, but because I know it at my soul, even though I don't know how it's going to be, what's going to come from it, as long as I continue to move from this place of intuitive knowing and feeling, and I can surrender in that, then it's all going to be okay. And so that's my thoughts to everyone, is to just do as often as you can every day things that make you proud of yourself, things that center and ground yourself, because there's so much external factors that we cannot control, but we do have the ability to reground and create that homeostasis, and to just know that something better is coming.
It's true. Abby, you have anything?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody pays attention to like the solar flares or things like that, but we've got a really major storm that's getting ready to hit the earth the next 3 days. And what I would just let everyone know is that it's going to be very normal. You know, go to the doctor if you feel like you need to, but it's going to be very normal to be feeling things like, you know, extreme dizziness, extreme ringing in the ears, you know, nauseousness. I mean, there's a whole list of symptoms that people can feel as they're going through these things. So you got to know that there's not anything wrong with you. You know, we're upgrading. You know, we're upgrading to the point that we can handle these higher frequencies. And the reality is that if each and every one of us took all of our problems and put them in a bag, and say Rachel puts her bag there and Sarah puts her bag there, I put my bag here, everybody else puts their bags up here. If we got to go look in all the bags, we would probably go straight back to our own bag and pick it up and take it home, you know, because we're all going through stuff, you know? So it's like, just know that and be kind to everybody that you run into because they're going through it too. And I think if we have that attitude that we're walking through this together, we're not secluded. And even though we may feel lonely at times, we're really never alone in any of it. And just connect energetically, even, you know, to those that you love. Like if they pop up in your head, send them a hug and send love. And when the universe pops in your head with stuff, send love and communicate what you're going through. And that'll help, you know, to weigh out the burden. You know, that way we get help carrying our burden.
I love that. I love what everybody said tonight. I think for me, it's like all about this experience that the fear is of the experience. It's the fear of really going into more of a positive place, which is really the most craziest part to me.
Yeah.
Is that you actually know and you actually feel and you actually see right in front of you, in your visions, in your emotions, in all your feelings, what is, whether we call that a right choice or not, just what feels so divine. But we are terrified of all the little chatter boxes inside that are telling us not to, of feeling like I can't do that because whatever. It could be so many things. And I think that Sagittarius and Jupiter and this full moon, and because Venus and the sun are together with this full moon, while Jupiter and the moon, it's all the benefics all in the same alignment in the galactic, you know, the galactic center zone, like coming together. That you are not crazy if that's what you feel is divine in your life. And it's okay if last week you thought it was something else. It's okay. I think that that's the biggest part about this is it's okay if that's how you thought it was and it shifted and it changed on you, that you flip-flopped in a weird different direction, or that's the biggest part of this is that's okay. Because I think that we feel with the Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn like, well, I fucking already said this to people. I'm going to do this in my road, and I'm doing that, so I got to just stay that way. But even if you feel like there's something way more that feels right for you and divine and more comfortable, that's okay. And I think that that's what helps with the fear is realizing if I'm actually on that experience, which actually feels what I want to feel, I already can tap in on places that I know that I want to go, that if I just went there, that there would be just the most amazing bliss ever by just actually not being afraid to just go there. Mm-hmm. You can feel it. You can tap into it right now. Like you can just feel it. And when we're almost like stupid for being like, well, I guess I'm just going to sit in the fear from it and hope that the bliss will come. It's like,
Yeah.
Really? Like, it's not showing up because Jupiter is about a door that opens, but you got to walk through it with Capricorn. So that's why Sag comes before Capricorn, because you have to be willing to experience it. And Capricorn is, once you have gone and said, I'm going through the door, all right, now we're on the trail. Now on the trail, you have to figure out things that are uncomfortable, but you can't take a refrigerator with you up a mountain. That's Cancer against Capricorn. There's home base, and then there's the trail to Mount Everest, right? Which, by the way, they just cleaned up a shit ton of trash. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was like hundreds of tons of trash from all the people that go to Mount Everest now. Just drop all their bottles in there.
That's what I was just going to say.
What?
And bodies.
They found dead bodies too, I know. But I thought it was interesting with this whole Capricorn transit, like Mount Everest, this masculine ego thing of like, I've got to conquer a mountain and with a picture now for Instagram. When really, when you look behind, it's just everybody's like on a rope and they're all following each other up for just a selfie. I just think that if that's what you feel like you have to do, go do that. But that once we go through that door and that experience, sure. As long as we made that choice from an emotional place of what feels like that center to our emotions, our self, our home inside, that the trail will get us to where we really need to go. And that's where I don't think there ever is something of like an accomplishment or goal, because I think that's the whole thing about Capricorn is it's a nice view at the top and then you come back down the mountain. You know what I mean? But it does leave a mark. And we all came here to leave a mark. We all did not come here to not. And I think that this is a big moment galactically and individually of this spiritual quest with the Saturn-Neptune thing that I've been talking about for a long time. That the spiritual quest is here. And I know it sounds like a cheesy 80s movie, but it's not. And these are tough choices that are really not that tough because they are divinely guided by what you know already. It's like whether you call that your guides are speaking to you, whether that's your own divine code and the pre-programming of why you came here starting to activate and telling you to go this way. If you want to look at it mathematically, if you want, whatever way you want to look at it, this is it where you laugh about it and go for the experience. And the experience is going to determine not everything, but just determine what it felt like. And if you look back and you go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, there is no such thing as you shouldn't have done that, because guaranteed there is the most blissful, awesome other doors that are opened on the other side. But choosing to not open doors, I think, right now is the place of the deepest fear that would encapsulate you from feeling like, I've used the term missing the boat, and I don't want to make people think that they're missing some sort of boat, but there is something inside everybody being poked at, being like, you're here because of this. You're here to do this at this point right now. You have to do this. You have to. You have to. Come on. And it's the fear of like stepping into that, because it's a giant leap, not for mankind, but for the universe. No pressure.
I could keep on talking too. This is just nuts.
Well, anyway, thank you for everybody for watching After Dark here at highvibe.tv. If you missed Deep Astrology, which we were talking a little bit about, but we always go into way other subjects, you can catch that at highvibe.tv for $1.99, or if you subscribe for literally the price of a large coffee, and you get all the content, my content, everybody else's content that's here on High Vibe, and even others that aren't here. Check it out, highvibe.tv. And of course, don't miss out on Dylan and on Sarah's school, which are on the High Vibe TV school. And of course, Rachel just came in here because she's got even more new content that she's been putting up here on highvibe.tv as well. And everybody give some props to Abby in the house, who's co-founded High Vibe here, and she always brings that extra high vibe, honestly. She's like a walking angel.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Yeah.
It is true. It's a different vibe when she's not here. And when she's here, it feels together fully.
I'm going to cry, so turn the cameras off now.
Okay, turn the cameras off.
Good night, guys.
I love you all. We all love you. And we're all sending you the best high vibes. And whatever choices you make, we know it's divine. Love you all.
Love you.
Bye.